Look at the time. It must be time for Legal AF After Dark. Yep, we're back. And of course, during the podcast, we had to talk about Donald Trump rewarding all of his criminal defense lawyers and giving them high-paying jobs in top leadership in the Department of Justice, the Office of the Solicitor General, the Secretary of the White House, you name it. Every one of these yahoos got a promotion. The jailed are now the jailers, and they're going after the prosecutors in a weaponized affair. Michael Popok and Ben Meiselas, we get together every Saturday, and here is a listen.
Some of the Trump lawyer names are probably familiar to you. Emil Bove or Emil Bove, Todd Blanche, John Sauer. I'm sure you've heard a bunch of those names before. Just to remind you, like John Sauer is an individual who was arguing on Trump's behalf before the United States Supreme Court that Trump should have absolute immunity. The Supreme Court gave Donald Trump absolute immunity to rule like a king, an authoritarian, a dictator. Apparently, to the United States Supreme Court's right wing, conservative means conserving the monarchy, not actually conserving our Constitution. Who would have thought that that's what they meant by conservative? I guess some people would have warned you of that. But during oral argument, one of the judges who was appointed, Supreme Court justices who was appointed by former President Barack Obama, wanted to explore the contours of what Trump's lawyer was arguing about absolute immunity. That lawyer, John Sauer, who Trump just appointed as basically one of the top 3 positions in the Department of Justice, which is called the Solicitor General, the position that argues before the Supreme Court on behalf of the Trump administration. Todd Blanche and Emil Bove got senior positions in the Trump administration as well that Popok will talk to you about. But I want you to hear this exchange just to remind you about what John Sauer, Trump's lawyer, argued about absolute immunity. And after hearing this argument, the right-wing justices said, yes, John Sauer, you are right. This is the power that Trump gets. Here, play this clip.
But it has to be proven. Malum in se is a concept long viewed as appropriate in law, that there's some things that are so fundamentally evil that they have to be protected against. Now, I think, and your answer below, I'm going to give you a chance to say if you stay by it. If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
It could, and why? Because he's doing it for personal reasons. He's not doing it like President Obama is alleged to have done it, to protect the country from a terrorist. He's doing it for personal gain. And isn't that the nature of the allegations here? That he's not doing these acts in furtherance of an official responsibility. He's doing it for personal gain.
I agree with that characterization of the indictment, and that confirms immunity, because the characterization is that there's a series of official acts that were done for an unlawful.
No, because immunity says even if you did it for personal gain, we won't hold you responsible. How could that be?
That's an extremely strong doctrine in this court's case law in cases like Fitzgerald.
Well, we go back to Justice Thomas's question.
So, Michael Popok, you heard there, Trump's lawyer argued, yes, it's an official core constitutional function. You should get immunity for that. And the right-wing justices said that you should get immunity to order SEAL Team 6 to assassinate political rivals.
Yeah, so first of all, that just reinforces for me anybody that was trying to push Sotomayor out the door and let Joe Biden in the last remaining days try to put somebody in there else. That's not the Senate, the lame duck senators don't have any will to do that. And so that'll just be a screw up. She'll resign and he won't be able to fill. So she needs to sit right where she is. She's one of the intellectual heavyweights for the progressive and free thinking side of the Supreme Court. And we can't lose Sotomayor at this time. That whole exchange came out of, as you referenced, an exchange in the lower court, the DC Court of Appeals, led by Judge Florence Pan, the now infamous SEAL Team 6 question, where you and I listened to that. We were texting each other at that moment. We were like, oh, that's the end of the case for the Trump administration, mainly because John Sauer had taken it to the extreme and he was so unwavering and doubling down in his position as to lose credibility. He certainly did it at the DC Court of Appeals level when she posited Judge Pan, picked up here by Judge Sotomayor, what if the president, as commander-in-chief, ordered SEAL Team 6 to take out a political rival? That's what Sotomayor said, I want to see if you're going to maintain your position that you did below. That's what she's referring to. John Sauer, just so you know where he's coming from, he is a anti-abortion attorney whose entire career has been spent trying to take away a woman's right to choose, funded primarily by a combination of the Koch brothers and a Leonard Leo Federalist Society pick. He had been the Missouri Attorney General, taken some extreme positions then. Now, that is why he was picked to be the appellate lawyer. Apparently, all of these criminal lawyers for Donald Trump, criminal defense lawyers for Donald Trump, were put together by Boris Epshteyn. We're going to talk about him later in the podcast. And John Sauer was one of them, replacing a revolving door of other appellate lawyers and people that were not very successful before appellate courts, including Alina Habba. John Sauer's got the credentials on paper. Look, he clerked for Judge Luttig, a friend of the podcast. I've interviewed Judge Luttig a half a dozen times. I've spoken to him about John Sauer. He said John was a brilliant mind, somebody that he was a very good law clerk and knows his way around the arguments at the Supreme Court, has argued there a number of times. He clerked for Antonin Scalia, who's one of the poster boys of the Federalist Society movement. So I know why he was nominated. But John has this nagging little habit of taking things that as you just heard, to the absolute extreme and not willing to bend an inch in his position. And while that was effective, and let's give credit where credit is due, he won two major decisions for Donald Trump. He won the Colorado decision, in which he argued that the 14th Amendment disqualification for insurrectionist clause could not be applied at the state level for a federal election. And he got an 8-1 vote on that. It may have been 9-0 on the things that mattered. And that's why, even though we keep talking about, what about the 14th Amendment insurrectionist clause? He made an argument that resonated with not just the MAGA right wing of the court. And then we fast forward several months later when he argued in April of last year the immunity decision, which ended up going almost completely in Donald Trump's favor. But John Sauer kind of let loose on as the Solicitor General, representing all the interest and the position of the United States of America, is quite different than, I think, than just being Donald Trump's lawyers. Now, look, he'll always resonate with Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas. The question is, will his consistently extreme positions, and you can see it here, and an often confusing way of arguing, will wear on the court. It's one thing to appear once in a while in front of the court. And John has another habit, which I think is grating, grating, grating on people, including the appellate judges who listen to him, which is he tries to pack into a sentence about 1,000 or more words. He tries, and it's fatiguing. It's also wearing on appellate judges. And he's been told to slow down, calm down, answer the question. I've heard that over and over again. When he's appearing, not just in randomly, but every week before the Supreme Court, what we want to try to do, if we're on the other side of the arguments, is aim for Amy Coney Barrett, who yeah, she sided with the majority in this, but I think she's not one that likes to be dragged to the most extreme positions like SEAL Team 6 or selling. The other thing that came up that we didn't talk about here, but just remind people, Gorsuch and others posited, well, would he be able as president, since his core constitutional right and power is to issue pardons, could he sell those pardons? Could he self-pardon? I mean, that all came up in the argument too, and John Sauer took a typical John Sauer position. So what I'm hoping is, by having somebody who's often considered to be the 10th justice of the United States Supreme Court, that's how much respect that position is given, that he will abuse it relatively quickly and wear out his welcome. And that will help, which is the only thing that we have a hope for the next 4 years, is that we can get Amy Coney Barrett and occasionally Roberts to move over to the logical side, the reasonable side, and join the three on the left, so to speak, or center, and on things that matter in opposing future Trump policy. We know this guy is going to go to the extreme every time and not give an inch. That doesn't always work, especially when it's 10 times a week at the United States Supreme Court. But to answer the question in the chat, John Sauer is going to get confirmed. And if you were wondering about, Todd Blanche, who was the most successful criminal defense lawyer for Donald Trump in his roster of revolving door criminal defense lawyers, which number almost a dozen starting at the beginning of the prosecutions, but landed on Todd Blanche and Emile Beauvais, his associate / partner. They have all been rewarded with deputy general counsel, which is now occupied by Lisa Monaco for Merrick Garland, and a first assistant to the deputy in Emile Beauvais. If Matt Gaetz gets lopped off, either voluntarily or involuntarily, I could easily see Todd Blanche being elevated to the attorney general position and everybody move up one notch. They will get confirmed. But now you have where Donald Trump is telling the world that he's against the weaponization of the Department of Justice. What you have now is the jailed have now become the jailers, and they've put the jailers in jail because all the criminal defense lawyers who were battling it out with the Department of Justice as criminal defense lawyers are now the prosecutors against the Department of Justice and the FBI. I don't take for a minute with a grain of sand or salt Alina Habba yesterday, because she speaks for she speaks Donald Trump's id. She says things out loud that he thinks, which is, we're coming after you, Jack Smith. Your resignation, you can resign, but you can't hide. We're coming after you. I mean, he already has round-the-clock security protection for good reason. And for her to kind of amp it up, and for people to think they're going to turn the page and we're going to be a unified country, his first thing is to put his criminal defense lawyers in all the prosecutor seats and all the top Department of Justice seats. And what do you think they're going to do about it? It's going to be MAGA hearings left and right, investigating the people that left the last administration, all the way up to Joe Biden. And then it's going to be these people opening up investigations against their political rivals. with a solicitor general who believes that giving out an assassination order, a murderous president, is immune. That's a problem. But what I'm hoping is that he's so extreme in his positions, Sauer, that it will turn off, as I said, the Amy Coney Barretts of the world, hoping to get her over to our position. If we don't aim for her in every argument, we have no chance of getting things in our favor 5-4 throughout the next 4 years or so. So that's just got to be, I'd love to change the dealer, but sometimes you just got to play the cards that you're dealt. And these are the cards that were dealt. This is the group that will get confirmed. The group that won't get, especially if we take to the streets, so to speak, call your senator. People are always, what can we do, Popok? You got 2 senators in every state. Call them now and oppose Hegseth, Gabbard, RFK Jr., and Gaetz for all different reasons, from being even put up for nomination, let alone confirmed.
You talk about the cards that you're dealt right now. Just so everybody knows, the Supreme Court, the legal AFers know this, but for those just joining, there's 9 Supreme Court justices. 6 have been appointed by Republican administrations. 1 was a George H.W. Bush appointee, Clarence Thomas. You have the other two were George W. Bush appointees, Justice Alito and John Roberts. 3 Republican appointees were appointed by Donald Trump. That's Gorsuch, Amy Coney Barrett, and Brett Kavanaugh. So that gives you your 6 right-wing justices. You have 3 Democratic appointees, 2 by former President Barack Obama. That's Justice Sotomayor and Justice Kagan. Then you have Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, who was appointed by President Biden. So that gives you your 6-3. In terms of what Popok was saying right there, Amy Coney Barrett's she was a Notre Dame law professor, didn't really have all that much experience as a trial lawyer, but her big issue was overturning Roe v. Wade. That's what she wrote about. Her life's mission was get Roe v. Wade overturned, right? So she did that. She achieved that. On other issues, if you can get past that, she's more of a moderating voice, still right-wing, but a more moderating voice on some of the other issues. And so is John Roberts on some of the other issues. So in terms of a litigator or as an advocate before the Supreme Court, as Popok says, if you are structuring your arguments, you're never going to get a 6-3. That just ain't happening because Clarence Thomas and Kavanaugh and Alito, they're never going with you. Gorsuch is almost never going to you. The 5-4 that the best you can get is bring Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett on your side. So just so people know the dynamic of what you kind of have to argue. And I think what we're going to start to see those 5-4s to look like on the most extreme excesses.
Welcome back. Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, we do a little podcast we formed 4.5 years ago called Legal AF. If you didn't know why we called it that, now you do. We sit at the intersection of law and politics so that you don't have to. We have so much to talk about. We formed a new channel in collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network. It's called Legal AF. How creative of us. Come over to Legal AF, the YouTube channel, hit the free subscribe button. I'm curating everything over there and doing a lot of the content. But you just watched a clip from one of our podcasts that we do on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. in a YouTube version and then on audio podcast platforms of your choice. So until your next viewing of Legal AF, which we invite you to join us this coming Wednesday for the new episode, I'm Michael Popok, and I'm reporting. In collaboration with the MeidasTouch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories, the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.